I enjoyed your documentary very much. In fact, as a critic, you kind of make it a habit. It's second nature to always try to find fault in something. Something they didn't do this right, they could have done this, they couldn't have done that. I have been racking my brain trying to find faults in your film as a documentary profile on a city icon. I can't find a fault in it. I've been
That's too generous.
trying. I promise you,
Too
Madeline, I've been
generous.
trying to fault your film. I can't do it. So I thought, why am I racking my brains out? Let her do it. You tell me, Madeleine Martiniello, can you fault the film? Was there something you left out? Was there something you wanted to do? Something you wanted to cover in this film?
Um, of course, there were like 100 things I left out. The edit process is a very tricky one, and I think I already tried to squeeze too many ideas into the film as it is, but even more got left by the wayside on the cutting room floor. I guess like something I really wanted to do that didn't end up happening was you can see in the film like how his customer base has kind of changed over the years from the post-war migrants who were all his customers in the heyday, but now the people coming into the shops actually the new migrants. And there's some scenes with them sort of browsing in the store, but I really wanted to actually profile one of their houses in the way I'd profiled um, the homes of the earlier migrants. But I tried for years to try and find someone to let me in, and it didn't work out. So I'm a bit sad that we didn't get to sort of see that perspective, and sort of get a window into their lives. I did want to dig a bit deeper into, like, I guess sort of the second generation's perception of Franco Cozzo, and that is sort of touched on very briefly the sort of cringe factor from the Italian community, because he represented this sort of like, caricature of Italianness and how that affected them. And that sort of only made a brief little mention. I feel like that could have gone slightly deeper.
Yeah, you can always argue that you could have done more, but the fact that you touched on that and touched on so many other points, all the hip hop stuff, all the pop cultural stuff, why the commercials were so successful. Um, I imagine you probably could have done 20 minutes on each point, but the fact that you did touch on these points, I just found it a very satisfying, very well rounded, very comprehensive documentary. And I did want to know just quickly, how much did you shoot? The film is 82 minutes long. How much was there? Because you have made a three-part TV series.
I mean, I don't think I ever actually tallied it up, but I spent basically, you know, more than 3 years filming with Franco, and that was like some of that was planned interviews, but some of that was just in my spare time, when I could, just going with a camera and spending time there at the shop with him, and I guess building that relationship and getting that observational perspective. So I can't give you a number, but hours and hours, I guess.
Yeah.
Plus, there was all the archive to sift through as well. And, there was so much beautiful old footage of the Italians in Melbourne, like in the 50s and 60s, and, heaps of stuff that I had to sort of just choose the best and accept that it wasn't all going to make it in.
Now I understand that Franco Cozzo had been approached several times over the years to have a documentary made of him, and he's always turned them down. What do you think it was that made him say yes to you?
I think it was probably a few factors. I think probably the timing was right. He's in this sort of final chapter. He was looking at selling, his Footscray store, which is his sort of jewel in his crown. Um, and so I guess, he's in his 80s. It was a time when he felt comfortable sort of to reflect. Um, on his life. So I think, I caught him at that right time where he was open to it. And then I think also, it worked in my favor that I'm a young woman with Italian heritage myself. My grandparents migrated in the same year as Franco Cozzo from southern Italy. So we sort of shared that cultural understanding. And I guess I knew how to behave around him because I know that sort of older Italian, I guess, character really well from my own family. So I think I knew how to build that rapport, and he trusted me because of it.
The film is very honest. It chronicles his ups and his downs, and you bring it right into the present day with the troubles that he was having with his business, that he overbought materials, that he had misread the market, basically. You also cover, some of the bumpy stuff in his background about his personal life, about his son, and the drug scandal around that. What was the understanding that you had with him going into this at the outset? Did you sit down and say, if we do this, we have to do it right, and we're going to cover everything? And if that was the case, did he push back?
Look, yeah, documentary is always really tricky with this sort of thing when you're going to profile someone's life. And obviously, you can't leave out the hard stuff. And, you know, early on, I did say to him we were going to have to cover it. And he wasn't very happy with it. And there was a point where I was wondering whether I was going to be able to use it in the doco or not, even though I knew it was so important. I guess it's also really important to maintain an ethical relationship with your subject, and have consent to tell certain parts of their story. So at first he was pretty pretty hesitant to go there. But after I guess a couple more years, even we kept sort of building that trust, and eventually he was willing to talk about it. But I guess you can see in the documentary he still doesn't feel comfortable doing that, even though he was willing to go there.
Can I just quickly ask you, what do you think the trigger was for him to allow you to be basically so honest and there with a camera crew as he's walking through that remarkable upstairs section of his Footscray store, where he's just got all this surplus furniture, and he's pointing out, saying, there's 5 bedroom suites over there, and he's just overstocked. I mean, that's a very revealing section, and it's a testament to, I guess, his willingness to be open. What triggered the trust?
Well, I think the trust between us was something that, was created over a time span. But I think maybe what triggered those reflections in that scene was actually just him being in that space. And, I think that space, up there in the big attic of the showroom, it has a melancholy feel. It's like a bit of a time capsule, and perhaps walking into that space was the trigger itself.
I think the documentary serves as, and Franco Cozzo serves as emblematic of the post-war migrant experience, and how all these people from Europe, from Italy, from Sicily, Greece, Yugoslavia, Malta, where my parents came from, all over Europe, they came to Australia looking for a better life, and they built it. And they kept aspects of their own culture while blending into the culture of this new country. And I think that your film does a superb job, I guess, crystallizing that narrative. Now, I want to know if it was intentional that this film is a reminder of that post-war migration experience, because my sense is that these days it tends to get sidelined These people who came out here and worked so hard and had to put up with a lot of abuse and a lot of discrimination are now just kind of lumped in to, oh, they're just another bunch of white people who came here, which is very unfair and very untrue. Your comment, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like the, post-war European migration is like just, fully accepted now. And because they've become so assimilated, people forget that there was ever racism towards that generation of migrants. But yeah, I mean, Franco was called like a black bastard on the street. I think people don't realize that, whiteness changes over time, and they actually weren't even considered part of that category. They were considered, exotic, foreign, especially the Southern Europeans were considered like racially different to the Northern Europeans and less desirable. So, yeah, I mean, I think in a way I was worried that people were going to be like, oh, we've seen this history of post-war migration before, it's boring, it's done. But I guess I always had hope that the film really took a different perspective on it, and had a lens that, renewed the interest in it, I suppose.
I think it certainly does that. It's such a Melbourne story. He's such an icon here. Will the film play beyond Melbourne, do you think?
Yeah, so it's actually coming out in Sydney this week as well, and I'm actually going to go to Sydney for a Q&A. And so I'm quite curious and a little bit nervous to see how it's received there. Not just because of the Melbourne-Sydney competitiveness. Like I wonder if they'll be willing to embrace him because he is so Melbourne. But look, obviously there's universal themes in the film about migration and aspiration and family. And I think, it should speak to people if they're willing to look past its niche appeal.
That was, I admit, a bit of a leading question because I think, and I'd like your response to this, I think you are in a win-win situation with this film. People who know Franco Cozzo and who have heard of him, I think will be captivated by this film. To a greater extent, I think people who either barely know of him or who don't know of him at all are going to go, what the hell is this? And they are going to be, I think, even more susceptible to be seduced by the film, and they will appreciate it arguably even more. What do you think of that?
I hope you're right. I mean, it's funny because, if you're from Melbourne, a majority of people just know who he is, without even really knowing why. So I guess it's hard for me to know what it would be like to be exposed to him as this character, without having any of that history. But I watched it for the first time in a cinema on Sunday, at the Nova. So obviously, like, Franco's sort of heartland. But I was really happy to like feel the energy in the room and just how much they responded to him as a person. Like, he just carries the audience. And I think that, there's a reason why he became this icon in Melbourne. And I think that charisma should translate on the screen to people who aren't from the city.
What did he think of the film when he saw it?
He really liked it. He was really, I guess, taken along on the journey of the ups and downs, I think, as if he was reliving it. When I was sitting there next to him when we screened it to him sort of before the final cut was locked, he would laugh when, he saw himself on Don Lane, but, and he started crying again when he talked about his mother and his sister. So, I think he felt all of it as he was watching it. But I think it was a bit overwhelming for him to see it. As you can imagine, I can't imagine someone presenting my life in film form back to me. So, but he's been super supportive. So yeah, it's been good.
And just in a nutshell, are you able to just, in terms of the research that you did for this film, which I imagine must have been a huge task, could you just, are you able to just characterize what the experience was like researching this film?
Well, I find research one of the, I guess, most satisfying parts of the film process. Gosh, it was everything from, talking to people who knew Franco to searching through the archives to, you know, hoping he could find that lost tape of the Don Lane show at the back of his shop. Like it was really a mix of, I guess, yeah, more institutional research and then the kind of more, I guess, on the ground grassroots research too.
Can I just sorry, just ask just one thing about what you just said?
Yeah.
That he would look for the Don Lane tape. Wouldn't that be in the Channel 9 archive? And wouldn't did
It
they help
luckily
you?
was it was in the end, but there was a reel that we had from Franco that didn't exist in the archive anymore. So there was like an extra excerpt. Um, and actually, it was really sad. There was something I couldn't find. He also was on the Graham Kennedy show, and we absolutely tried our hardest. The NFSA had half of the episode, the one that he was on, but they didn't have the half of the episode that he was on it. And then yes, it was a whole big search party, but we couldn't bring it up. So it's sad when pieces of archive exist and you can't get your hands on them. But great when you do get something that's otherwise missing.
Well, I feel your pain. That must have been an awful experience. But in the end, I think you've put together a wonderful documentary. Early congratulations for the awards that I think it's going to pick up. And
I'm not sure. We'll see. We'll see.
Madeleine Martiniello, I'm very glad that the film is actually being released in this post lockdown window that we have, and that it'll be seen on the screen where I imagine you want it to be seen, not online.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm so relieved that it's getting an in-person audience finally. Yeah.
Can I just get just a quick mini bio of you? You were at the VCA. Just tell me just a little about your background.
Yeah, so I didn't come to filmmaking straight away. I studied literature at Melbourne Uni, and then um, after I finished that, I sort of was wondering what I wanted to do. I'd always been a bit of a cinephile, and I enrolled at VCA and did the Masters of Documentary Filmmaking there. And I ended up, this was sort of the first big thing I started working on straight after film school. So yeah, it's been a great first project, I have to say.
Did you apply principles and guidelines from that course into the making of this film?
Um, I think so. Yeah, I don't know if there's something in particular, but I guess it was definitely drummed into me at film school that we had to have a really ethical relationship with our subjects. And in fact, like, we were taught to not call them subjects, but to call them participants in the documentary, which I do really like and prefer. That idea that, it's not just about them, but they're also fully part of the process of sort of telling their own story. So I hope that Franco feels like that's how I approach the filmmaking process with him.
And you're friends now with him and his family?
Yeah. I mean, it's
Oh
inevitable
dear.
that you sort of.
Have you crossed the line? Are you allowed to do that?
Well, look, obviously
I'm being
you have
silly.
to maintain some professional distance, but it's also hard not to after 4 years. But I think by the end they were pretty sick of me calling them every week.